On this week's Movie HighLow, we're talking Summerisle, phallic symbols, and a shark or something? Killing us won't bring back your goddamn honey. This is Neil LaButte's The Wicker Man. You've got a cold. We should tell the people.
Yes, I have a cold and I'm very stuffy, but I am still more than confident and able to talk.
I think you're very competent. What are you drinking? What are you drinking to help soothe your cold while we record this podcast?
Gin mead, some herbal tea, black cherry tea, and honey.
That sounds good.
Yeah, it feels good, but it doesn't feel scratchy, but it's still...
See, I like the idea of a herbal. I always say herbal. And we say because there's a fucking H in it. They call them herbal.
The Brits. I did that.
I did that.
I did that. The Brits would say herbal
because there's a fucking H in it. But an herbal, whatever you want to call it, tea. Schedule. Yeah. I actually like that too. I think it sounds more refined. It sounds more like the Lou. I always think of the Big Lou, but that's a different story altogether. But I was saying I like the idea of an herbal drink that has a little bit of a kick from a whiskey in it.
The bourbon is known for being soothing. I mean, that's something that it's like an old live remedy that you would rub bourbon on the gums of a teething infant to alleviate their pain of teething, because the teeth are starting to emerge from the gums. So that can be very painful for an infant, and the only way they can manifest that pain is by crying and wailing. So
you get them look it up a little bit.
You're not feeding them, like you're not pouring it down their throat, but you just rub a little bourbon on the
Yeah, and they get a little buzz going, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm fine now. I don't give a shit about this."
It works as like an anesthetic almost.
I like that. It makes a lot of sense. It's all right.
So it's making my throat feel good, but I'm not feeling any less stuff. Maybe if I was drinking peppermint tea or something, it might feel a little less congested.
Well, we should welcome everyone to another episode of Movie HighLow,
And hopefully,
a podcast discussing the best and worst that cinema has to offer.
absolutely,
I'm Dom.
I'm Danielle, and I'm Wise from this team.
We're talking about Oscar movies and Oscar season, and I can tell you right now, one movie that was not nominated for Oscars is the movie that we're discussing this week, which is The Wicker Man, directed by Neil LaButte, released on September 1st, 2006. This is a low episode. Says who? Well, The Wicker Man right now has a 3.7 rating on IMDb, which puts it in the bottom 100. It's actually the number 71 lowest movie of all time, according to IMDb. Has a 15% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and was nominated for 5 Razzies. It did not win any of the Razzies. No. The Battlefield Earth is much. Yeah. And we'll compare. I think there's probably a few interesting comparisons we can make, but was nominated for 5 Razzies, including Worst Picture, Worst Actor, Worst Remake or Ripoff, Worst Screenplay, and Worst Screen Couple. Now, Screen Couple for this one was listed as Nicolas Cage and his bear suit. This movie is gonna. I feel like.
Wasn't the bear suit that long enough to be considered a relationship?
But even him and I forget the actress's name who's in the movie. They're not paired correctly whatsoever.
She seems spacey.
Yeah, and way too good looking for a kind of a weirdo looking guy like him. So before we get into it,
Kind of reminds me of Natalie Imbruglia.
she did look like Natalie Imbruglia.
Like with different color hair.
Wow,
The short dark
she's all out of faith. This is how she feels. She's torn and she is shamed, lying naked on the floor. I remember that song was on the radio all the time. Jesus. So let me do a quick movie synopsis for anybody who has not seen the film. Seattle motorcycle cop Edward Malus is haunted by the event of a bizarre roadside accident where he failed to save the lives of a mother and her young daughter. While on extended leave, he receives a letter from his former lover pleading for his help to try and find her missing child, Rowan. This leads Malus to the island of Summerisle, inhabited by a warped polytheistic feminist cult. Polytheistic.
Should I read this?
I don't know, maybe. Malus soon realizes that this hive of demented women may or may not have kidnapped Rowan with the intention of a ritualistic human sacrifice. Malus must find Rowan before it's too late or allow her to suffer the fate of an appointment with the Wicker Man. Does that about sum it up? So we need to clarify right off the top that what we watched was the unrated version of the movie. The biggest differences between the unrated version and the theatrical version, which is PG-13, is the torture scene. It's unrated. So it was not given a rating by the MPAA. So when they released it, the point is when they released it, the MPAA found that scene to be a torture scene, and they thought that if they cut that scene out of the movie, it could be released as a PG-13 movie, and therefore would give it a wider audience to see. So if like someone who's listening to this wants to watch the movie, I think it's available on HBO, or it might even be available on Prime. If you go and you watch the theatrical version, the PG-13, and you're expecting to see all the great stuff that you've seen on YouTube with Nicolas Cage, you're gonna be very disappointed, because all of that stuff happens. It's all off camera. In the theatrical version, you just kind of hear clips of it as they're marching him toward the Wicker Man at the end. So I would certainly recommend, if you're going to watch this movie, seek out the unrated version, because it's got all the good stuff in it. This is, before we get into it, I just want to say, for me, this episode is kind of an anomaly, because I think that all of the lows of this movie are kind of highs. It's one of the weird things where everything that makes this movie not a good film are kind of the things that make it the most enjoyable to watch. The way that we had a slog through Battlefield Earth last week.
I said it was so funny because that was John Travolta, this is Nicolas Cage, and I kept doing a face off because they're both nemesis in that movie. Nemesis, I suppose.
Nemesis?
And I'm like, if I had to pick a team, I'd pick Team Cage, because the difference is that I really enjoy watching Nicolas Cage. I don't know, just be Nicolas Cage. I mean, I enjoy John Travolta movies too, but with Battlefield Earth, the goofiness wasn't like, I mean, aside from the "Do you want lunch" part, "Do you want lunch?" It wasn't really. I can't explain it. It's just it's not the same. Like with Nicolas Cage, it's like it's one of a kind, distinct Nicolas Cage isms and his freakouts, and he's just, you can tell he's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what makes it so awesome.
Yeah.
It's like he really invests himself in the role, and maybe sometimes to others it might be perceived as kind of silly, or his portrayals or his acting might be kind of odd. But to him, it's like he's just getting lost in the character.
He's going for it.
When you're watching it, a lot, there's always every movie like that montage we find on YouTube.
Well, everyone should spend 4 minutes on YouTube watching the YouTube video Nicolas Cage losing his shit, because it's
like Al Pacino.
Perfect.
It's like every movie he's in has a freak out.
He has to have a freak out scene.
I mean, he's not just like Al Pacino, but he shares the same fervor in his roles, that he has a scene in every movie where he just gets so heated and animated to some degree that it's like you're just completely unhinged.
Well, so again, I'm gonna call it, and obviously I want you to kind of lead this, but like I think we have to start with this movie. I think we have to start with Nicolas Cage, because this is a movie that transcends being it's so bad it's good. This is one of those movies, for me at least, is that it's a certain flavor of garbage that you like to taste once in a while, I guess. I don't know how else to put it. It's junk food. It's it's McDonald's. It's like smashing.
It's just, you know what it's like now. Okay, it's not like food's not good for you. It's like that weird recipe that your grandmother makes that nobody understands and thinks it's weird. Like you're eating that, but it's delicious. Nobody gets it. That's what it's like. So it's not junk food. It's not healthy food per se. It's that food that you like, that people don't really maybe necessarily understand why it would be liked, and you're weird for liking it. Your peanut butter and mustard sandwich on raisin bread.
That sounds terrible. I hate peanut butter in general. The lows of this movie weirdly become the highs, and I think that the first low/high of the movie is Nick Cage's performance. It is something to behold. It's one for the ages. It is.
How many times watching this movie, and we've seen this movie more than once, do we just find ourselves laughing? Like it's just.
It's
And I really wonder if that was his intention, Nicolas Cage.
it's not. It's not. This
He really takes himself
Nick. No, no, no.
seriously.
This is the thing. This is. I find this to be kind of an annoying thing about movies like this, where Nick Cage. Sometimes when a movie like this, when a movie is unintentionally funny, like the way that this movie is, there tends to be this way to try to retroactively call it comedy. So, like, I've read something about Nick Cage saying that this was meant to be a black comedy, which is bullshit. Which is the type of thing that you say.
But that at least tells me that maybe he has a sense of humor about it. Because I'm picking up on that.
Well,
and I'm wondering if it's because it's that much of a joke, or it's because he's intentionally
but
trying
there's
to make it
nothing.
funny.
No. I think there's nothing in the movie. Let me put it to you this way: when I think of a black comedy, I think of something like Very Bad Things. I think of something like American Psycho. I think of something where the movie in and of itself, in the way that it's presented, is showing some type of self-awareness that it is meant to be comedy. This movie with the score, I mean, this movie is presented as if it is a thriller or a horror film. It's there's nothing.
I would call more of a thriller than
A thriller, right?
too.
But there's nothing. There's
But
nothing.
But what you're saying is that Nicolas Cage identifies with it as a black comedy. That makes me feel like, okay, he does have a sense of humor about some of the goofiness of it.
But what I think is that what I'm trying to say is that I think that that's if you make something that you're trying for it to be taken seriously and people sit there and laugh at it, the easiest thing for you to do is say, when people are laughing, yeah, it's supposed to be funny, because it's easier to say that. It's exactly what happened. There's nothing.
It's kind of sad.
There's nothing. There's nothing.
Seriously, get it, take it out, like, oh yeah, I twitch your time to make it funny.
At least that's my opinion. I don't think there's anything in the movie.
It's kind of sad. I kind of feel bad for him.
Let me put it to you this way: if I could solve this for you right now. Do you want to know how you make this movie into a black comedy? How you start the movie so that people know it's a black comedy? I'll tell you exactly. I'll solve the problem for you right now. You start this movie, that opening scene where he's on his motorcycle and he's driving around, and the little girl throws the doll out the window, and like he's driving like 75 miles an hour and like does the one-handed grab off the ground and picks up the doll and chases after them. You want this to be a black comedy? He needs to eat shit when he tries to do that. He needs to like try to grab that doll and like dump off of his bike and like roll like 5 times and have to get up and walk it off, and then bump into them later, like at a rest stop, or like they got a flat tire and they pulled over. Because then it's like the movie is almost showing you that like it knows it's silly, it knows it's stupid, it knows that you can't drive 75 miles an hour and one-handed grab a doll off the ground. You know, the movie is not being played as a black comedy. The movie's being played as a straight thriller. You know, and now it's easy because it's so unintentionally funny. It's easy now to say, "Oh, it was really a black comedy the whole time." I think that's a little bit of bullshit, but I'm willing to give Nick Cage a pass, because I feel like if you watch this movie expecting a thriller, you're going to be disappointed. If you sit down and you invest an hour and 40 minutes, exactly, he can eat a pizza for hours.
Watching him makes me want to eat a pizza for hours while watching him.
Carla was the prom queen. Losers always whine about their best. Winners go home and fuck the prom queen. That's another great Nick Cage. This is the thing about Nick Cage, in my opinion, is that he's only got 2 speeds. Okay, he's either amazing or he's god awful, and that's totally tied to.
But even when he's got off, he's awesome.
He's awesome to watch. He's awesome to watch. But what I'm saying is that if you watch a Nick Cage movie, I feel like you're gonna get adaptation, or you're gonna get Bad Lieutenant Port of Call, New Orleans, which is a totally underrated and underseen movie that he's amazing in. The Weatherman is another great movie that he's in. Nick Cage he's either amazing in movies or he's bad in movies, and I think that's totally tied to whether or not the filmmaker knows how to harness his manic energy in a way that's helpful for the story, for the film. Exactly. And something like this, you can tell that, you know, the script, as far as it being a good movie, it's not a good movie. It's a movie. Yeah, absolutely. No, he is. He is. I read an article, or I think I've maybe watched an interview with him where he was talking about in Bad Lieutenant. Again, I cannot recommend this movie enough. This is, if you want to watch a Wicker Man performance in a good movie, watch Bad Lieutenant Port of Call in New Orleans, because he's unbelievable. But he was talking about, Werner Herzog directed that movie, and he was talking about how in between takes he was pretending to sniff some kind of, like, he wasn't sniffing coke, but he was doing something where he was sniffing what looked like coke, and it was like a method thing where it was him getting into, and Werner Herzog like would come over to him and be like, "Nicholas, is that cocaine?" And he's like it fucked up his process. He was getting upset where it was like, "No, it's not coke, it's sugar," or whatever it is that he's doing. But he's like, "Yeah, it's fucking coke." Like, it's him trying to get himself gassed up for the performance that he has to give as a guy who's on drugs or doing whatever. So I definitely think that he's definitely a method actor. He's definitely somebody who takes the process very, very, very seriously. And the performance that he gives in this movie is so interesting to watch, because he swings from these, he's trying to be normal. He's just trying to be a normal guy in certain scenes, and him trying to be normal is like dweeby verging on creepy, verging on like being like, what is it, a shark? Him being normal is almost like a person who has studied human interaction but never had any. So anytime he's trying to behave normally in this movie, he just comes off as like very strange. And he swings from one extreme of trying to be normal to being totally over the top, and the how to get burned, and he's doing that version of himself. So it's one of those things where it's like, he's just swinging from extremes in this performance. I don't want to.
Which is part of why he's so endearing. Watching his performances.
But in this movie in particular, it's very strange how punctuated. The whole reason to watch this movie really is to watch what Nick Cage is doing in it, because the fact that you watch this movie and you're kind of like, the fact that this performance exists, that it actually is on film, it was recorded, we can watch it now, is something to behold. Tell me some of your highs, some of your lows.
I actually, when we were watching this and taking our notes, I found myself writing a lot more highs, and some would argue that the highs are the lows, like you were saying, because it's like they're so silly, but at the same time, part of what makes it awesome to watch. The first thing I wrote was the little girl, the first 5 minutes, right, in the car accident. She said, "I'm bored," and then the car catches fire. And I just thought that was a really cool way to kind of start off the movie, leaving you with more questions than answers. When the fire breaks out and he comes to, see if everything's okay, and he sees that the little girl's still alive, he tries to break through the back window to get to her. If the car explodes, whatever, it's like, it's a cool scene. I mean, it's always cool to see kids that are kind of like fresh and smart, like, "I'm bored," and then the fucking fire breaks out. It was cool. I liked it. But it's also telling that there's something going on in this movie. I'm so stuffy. It's like,
Yeah, I feel like you sound worse now.
I'm sorry to people if I sound like I'm making you sick now because you're listening to me, but a little Wicker Man, title Wicker Man. Oh, I liked that in the opening, when they were doing the opening title, when they showed it, the portion of the title, and it said the Wicker Man, how it looked like the letters are all made out of wicker. I liked that. That was really high.
That's
Is that a stupid high? I like that.
It's not a stupid high. It's just
Ahoy there. The guy at the boat plate. Ahoy there. I didn't know what to say. Oh no, he says that. Okay. Nicolas Cage says, "Ahoy there." I didn't know what to say. Like, because he's so goofy. Like you were talking about, like when he's trying to be normal, it's like it's not normal. Let's try to ahoy there. I don't know. I just thought we were supposed to say. Like, it's so funny.
Yeah, that's he's like an alien who's watched tapes of what a person is supposed to act like.
Nicolas Cage trying to be normal is awesome.
Because he's clearly not a normal guy. He's not a normal guy by any stretch of the imagination.
And they put beautiful cinematography.
Really? You think the cinematography was beautiful?
Yeah.
I mean, they do.
The drone shots, like the overhead shots.
Well, they weren't drones back then. They were doing real helicopters.
Okay, but still, like the overhead shots.
Aerials.
Yeah, the aerials are beautiful and stuff. I mean, yeah, it is beautiful. I mean,
I guess you could say that.
And Summerisle, for all the goings on in that place, it was a beautiful place. It was a high dream,
So you should,
I wrote down the what's in the bag of shark or something.
that's my that.
Shark or something?
So okay, so hold on. We got to talk about this for a second because this to me is this guy has to be the worst cop ever. If his whole motivation to go to this island is that he is trying to locate a missing child, okay? And the first interaction that he has when he gets to this island is a group of people carrying a bag that is moving and bloodied.
I know, right?
And looks like
It's true.
looks like roughly the size of a child.
Right.
And his reaction is, "What do you got? A shark or something?"
I know, that's true.
It's like
It's beyond goofy.
as a cop, wouldn't you be like, I need you to open this bag right now to see what is in this because I'm looking for a missing child and this is a fucked up scenario. Maybe that's one of the ways that it holds water, that they're doing some kind of, absurdist comedy, but it's one of those things where
Very good point.
it's
I think that's probably why that line is so funny too. It's like, really? You fucking sort of out, like,
it's so goofy.
you ask it when it has
Keep going.
right down the list. Oh, that's something with C2 that was cool. Was that all the windows that they were hexagonal shaped because if you actually
Like a honeycomb or
everything is hexagonal shaped. It's like at least based on that shape. So that's kind of cool. But when he gets to that bar, I don't know what the actress's name is, but the taller, kind of heavy set one, sister something or other.
one of the sisters. There's many sisters in that movie.
Probably about put it right. And he goes, "What are you? You must be the barmaid or something, right?" Like, what did he say? The line was, "Are you the barmaid? Wait, are you the barmaid or whatever you call it?" I just thought it was funny. It's like just like when he goes ahoy, like it's like there's a couple of lines in the movie. Another one that comes to mind that I didn't write down, but I'm trying to remember. And he's talking to Ellen Burstyn, and she was like, "Perhaps in time." She goes, "Maybe in time you'll be get down just to it, perhaps." And he goes, "Well, perhaps." Just stop fucking talking. What is? Oh.
You cut the bullshit, or he
Right.
says something.
But like you're right on the press. She goes, "You'll understand in time, perhaps." He goes, "Perhaps it's time for you to stop bullshitting me." That's what it is. Perhaps it's time for you to stop bullshitting me.
It's him swinging from.
Can't even try to
I know.
I
You're suffering
But
through
it's
it.
funny,
You're a good sport.
But it is funny when you're watching it, like his delivery of these lines. So it's like, it's just the lines, the way he's saying them, the timing in which he delivers them, just like the timing in which he delivers punches in this movie.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Oh,
like, why
okay.
The timing in which he falls down fucking hills and fucking
Yeah.
gets
Yeah. I mean, listen. There's no way we can talk about this movie without getting into the third act of this movie is bananas. It is totally off the wall, crazy. I mean, I honestly, I remember watching this movie before it kind of became this meme or like this online legend. Before people were really aware of how silly and over the top it was. I remember actually seeing this movie like when you were watching something that was on television when it first came out. But I'm saying like when it first came out, when you were expecting it to be within the genre that it was presenting itself in, which was that you expected it to be like a thriller or whatever. And I remember getting to that last act of the movie, and when he is just punching women in the face and like drop kicks Lily Sobieski.
I love to see me slowly walking down the staircase. She goes, "You look a little worse for her." It's just a slow descent down the staircase. He's just keeping his eyes locked on her, slow descent, and just walk right to her.
And just boom, roundhouse.
It's like the comedic timing of it. It's just like,
it's weird because
I'm not advocating hitting women or
nobody's advocating hitting women. It's
the way the dialogue and the blocking are timed out.
he hits 3 women pretty hard within the course of like 5 minutes of the movie, and by the end is in a bear costume and is running full force at a woman and just like throws a fucking haymaker.
What's wrong, sister? That's what's wrong.
It's the last. I mean, you get to the last act of this movie, and you're watching something that I don't know that I've ever seen anything like it in any other movie ever.
Another scene that's great in this movie is the scene where he goes to the schoolhouse.
Oh, with the kids, phallic symbol.
Like, what is that? What does it stand for? Phallic symbol. But the teacher's great too, but Sister Rose or whatever. And then when she introduces herself, he goes, "Of course, another plant." So,
Well, even like when he first walks in and he's like, "I'm a policeman. Here's my badge."
it's like this is career day at the school. Like,
It's so silly and so. So, all right, let me ask you a question because I think this is interesting. Now, the original, and again, I remember seeing the original Wicker Man. I probably in high school. I may have really only watched it once, and I have kind of vague, like I remember certain parts of it, but I don't have a very comprehensive memory of the film. But other than knowing that it was a classic, and other than knowing that it was something kind of special, Christopher Lee considers it his best performance in any movie ever. Um, Christopher Lee is in the original. He's in the 1973 version. Yes, as in Dracula, as in Christopher Lee. As in Christopher Lee had been in 90s in the movie. Well, because you never saw the original. So you wouldn't remember. He's in the original Wicker Man.
I never saw that.
Well,
I thought you meant he was in this movie. I was like,
you are on a lot of Dayquil right now, aren't you?
I'm not in any Dayquil right now.
Okay.
I just got stuffy.
But the point is that I don't remember where I was going with this. No, I was using Christopher Lee as an example. Right, but what was I?
About the school scene and the Sister Rose.
Okay. Where I was going with this was in the original version of the movie, the kind of the conflict is the idea of Christianity versus paganism. So the main character, the Malus character. By the way, real quick, just an aside, Malus. This is the level, and we're gonna get in. No, we're gonna get into the one of my other lows, which is the screenwriting, which I have to talk about Neil LaBute's screenwriting in a bit. But Malus, from what I've read, is the way that they came up with Nick Cage's character's name Malus is that it's the word male and phallus put together. So that's the level of screenwriting that we're dealing with. It's a little stupid. In the original version of The Wicker Man, the conflict is sort of between the ideas of Christianity, the idealism of Christianity and paganism. And that's sort of where the conflict comes from. In this version, in this updated version that Neil LaBute has done, is sort of there's this whole feminist approach to it where the island is inhabited by these women who have dominated. They have a very select few amount of men. They've cut all their tongues out. They've made them subservient to the women. They talk about, like, at one point, Ellen Bernstein says something to the effect of, like, we love our men, but we're not subservient to them. They are here to help us procreate. That is their role, in the world that we've created here. So I'm just curious from your perspective, like, what do you think about? Is there something to be said about how they changed it from the idea of Christianity versus?
Because if you look at movies and plays and any sort of form of entertainment that's existed since the dawn of time to now, 90% of the time it's about the male being the protagonist, the male being the lead character, the one that you follow and are supposed to identify with, and the women are almost always, not in every movie, but a lot of times are meant to serve the male character in the movie. It's the idea of following a woman's story and the issues and struggles in day-to-day life or anything from her perspective as the protagonist of a movie is actually still a pretty relatively new concept in cinema, I would say. It's not usually the way that movies work. So I think it's a very interesting twist and take on it that, I mean, some would argue, exactly, like, forever, the perception of women has been to procreate, to have children, and to make a home, and that's the purpose you serve. Women weren't educated in many societies, and still to this day, in some cultures, aren't educated because the need for you to be educated isn't there. Why? You're just meant to be a wife and a mother, and you need to know how to cook and clean and sew, and you don't need to know how to count or read or know about politics or any of that stuff because your roles aren't the role that you are meant to fulfill isn't anything.
That sucks.
And that still exists today in some cultures. But so I think it's a very interesting stance to take on it, and I think it has a lot to do with feminism and female empowerment. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that at all. Of course not.
A beauty to the idea of that because when you think about it, yeah, I mean, there's single mothers out there that are happy to become impregnated through in vitro and most cases, they do want to know who the father is, but they don't need to raise their child alongside male partners.
Well, it's kind of like. Do you remember that movie, The World According to Garp? The whole Glenn Close character, where she decides that she's like, I'm going to use this guy as a way to get pregnant, but not have to make him be a father, not have to live with him as.
And Big Lebowski, right? She just wants a baby. She
Yeah.
Wants, you're like a sperm donor.
Yeah, that's it.
And I think there's a beauty to that, and I think that the time for that voice to be heard, it's well overdue, and I think it's very welcomed for a lot of women. And something I like that it's refreshing because you don't hear that viewpoint. You don't see that viewpoint portrayed.
I agree.
I haven't seen it portrayed.
It's not enough.
It's an interesting twisted take on, we love our men, and they serve a purpose to us, but we're not subservient to them. If anything, she doesn't say it, but you get that they're subservient to us. They're here to serve us.
They're totally subservient.
We're not here to serve them. And I think it's a really cool, different take to take on who's supposed to be in charge of everything.
So the update to this movie to you is it's an upgrade from what they.
I think it's interesting.
It is interesting. There's a cool thing called the Bechdel test, which is there's two questions that you have to ask yourself when you watch a movie. And the first question is, are there more than two female characters? Actually, I'm sorry, there's three questions. Are there more than two female characters is the first question. The second question is, are those two female characters in a scene together? And then the third question is, do they talk about anything other than a man? And it's like most movies don't pass that test.
Right.
There aren't two female characters. They aren't in a scene together. And if they are in a scene together, they're talking about a guy. So it becomes this thing where that's pretty fucked up from a woman's perspective to have to kind of watch movies told that.
The idea, I did some Wikipedia research because Wikipedia is my advice, and they said that the Wicker Man is based off an actual pagan tradition that was practiced by Druids, a Celtic tribe, and that it's obviously meant to be sacrificial.
Mm-hmm.
And that they burn effigies, and they had different depictions of it, different parts of the United Kingdom, parts of Scotland, and England, and Ireland, and different forms of it, that even to this day, people still burn them. And it reminded me in some respects of that movie that we saw, Midsommar, as well.
This movie, I honestly think that Midsommar is first of all, I really like that movie. I think I actually liked it better than Hereditary, because it's the same director. And I think that guy definitely 100% was completely inspired by the original Wicker Man movie. Like right down to the bear costume, but also the example of, if you look at Midsommar is a perfect example of a way that a movie can take these kind of ritualistic ideas and do it so that it is done in a way that's scary, in a way that's dramatic, and that movie is even funny at certain points.
I think the thing that's scariest about in these movies is that they always introduce people that aren't from these cultures. So people that aren't used to dealing with the concepts of life and death and fertility and virility, and how humankind has a relation and connection to the earth, and how the earth and harvest can be affected by sacrifices, or fertility as women and fertility of the earth are hand in hand, and all these things, all these concepts. It's the thing that makes it scary in these movies, all the ones we just mentioned, Midsommar, or even the Wicker Man movies. It's the idea that they're introducing characters that are from the Western world, and it's not something
It's culture shock.
So it is scary, like the idea of a ritualistic sacrifice, or even in Midsommar, where it's the idea that when you get to a certain age, you kill yourself, because that's. And you die with honor, you die with grace and dignity. Right? To people over here, they might not be used to the idea of that. That's a very scary. That's what they prey upon, and maybe that's why it is scary, because it's scary to people like us who that's not how we're raised. And that's what we have to look forward to someday.
But even
our role in our community.
And even at the end of the movie, and again in this unrated version of the movie that we watched, Nicolas Cage's character is like protesting at the end of the movie, where he's saying, I don't believe in your God. I'm not one of you. So he's kind of like making the point that you're sacrificing me, but I'm not. I'm the wrong sacrifice. I'm not.
We watched that scene too, and she's like, you'll become a god now, or you'll live on.
It's like, I don't believe in it.
She said you'd become a king. Is what she said. You will become a king now. Like, I don't know how she worded it, but this isn't why you came here, but you will live on in eternity as a king. because of the sacrifice that you're making, whether or not you believe it or not.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk some more.
Oh, what is that? What is that? What is it? Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah! Out of my eyes! Eyes! Ah! Ah!
So, coming back, what other stuff do you got? I've got a couple. The truth is, I've got some notes on this, but you were jotting down way more notes than I was watching this movie.
Most of my highs, actually.
Did you?
The other thing I wrote for a high was, well. Oh, yeah, right. I already mentioned that, I guess. The well, you look a little worse for wear, and then he slowly descends down the staircase, locking eyes with sister, whatever her name is, and then just decks her. Just walks up the staircase, not leaving eye contact, pauses, still looking at her, and then just decks her. It's like, meeting time, it was hilarious. And then the other thing I wrote was, yeah, exactly. At the end, where he's in the hair costume. And what is it, sister? What's wrong? And then he just punches the lady while they're about to burn Rowan. That was funny too.
See, you're calling all of these your highs, and I feel like a lot of this stuff, like I'm positioning it more as lows because I think these are the things that make the movie a shitty movie. But again, I think that
that's makes it so funny to watch.
Yeah, lows. Other things I would say are lows. I think like the screenplay is a low, and again, it's a low because it's ineffective at being what it's trying to be, which is a thriller. It plays more as a comedy, unintentionally. So you have specific lows that are actually lows. Like these are things that are not.
Exactly, I put down as my lows.
Okay.
One of them that comes to mind without me looking is those twins.
Oh God.
Twins that repeat everything that's said. It's like, oh wow, you're trying to be creepy blind twins that just repeat what's being said for the sake of it.
It's like the.
For the sake of being creepy. It's not creepy because I know exactly what you're trying to do. Like it's just.
It's pretty hacky.
Every time you see them, the line is, was it Sister Rose that was saying it? Or I think it was the Dr. Moss. Death and Rebirth. They're talking about the Death and Rebirth festival, and they go, yes, on the Wicker Man's return. Yes, on the Wicker Man's return. And they say together, used and perfectly said. And it's like, oh, it's almost like trying to be the Shining.
It's the Grady twins. Hey, it's the Grady twins grown up.
But they're blind and they're old and they talk in unison, you know. I wrote down, of course, he's in this weird stunt barn because early in the movie when he first gets to Summerisle. And then he finds his barn. It's like, of course, it's like this barn that's equipped for all these stunts. Basically, it's like he's hanging from the rafters here, and like then something explode or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just silly. It's like, of course, this is the way the barn is. And then I wrote down the how quixotic of you, boo. The
Don Quixote.
The schoolhouse scene or whatever. Like it's like, oh, vocabulary words, you know, how it relates to what we're talking about, language arts and blah blah blah. How quixotic of you? Well, it's like trying to pass off that word like it's an everyday language type of word, but really for nothing more than to make yourself sound incredibly morose.
Yeah.
Intellectual. It's like, okay, it's so stupid. The other thing I wrote was that he's supposed to be so deathly allergic to bees, but he's on this island that he knows are all, like, right from the first step, okay, oh, this is our local mead. You know that mead, she says honey and herbs. Mead means honey. When you hear the word mead, think honey.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're allergic to bees. You know right from jump that this place is all about bees and harvesting.
Well, that's all their production is based off of honey.
And he keeps getting in these situations, that scene where he's like falling down this hillside of all these different hives and.
That scene's so funny.
Like, of course he's getting himself into this mess, but you're definitely allergic. Like, of course you are. And then he's talking to Ellen Burstyn for the first time when he first meets,
Sister Summerisle.
Right, I was gonna say lady. Sister Summerisle. And he's like smacking the bees and landing on his neck, and it's like, it's not a mosquito. It's not a black fly. Like, you're allergic to bees. First of all, I'm not allergic to bees, okay? I know that if a bee landed me, I don't do this because it's probably gonna sting me. I just an instinct. I know that bees are gonna sting. I don't do this because it's gonna sting me. He's definitely allergic to bees, and they're landing on him. He's fucking smacking them like this. I'm like, are you trying to get stung? It's like, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's so by the time he gets to that last scene, the quote-unquote torture scene, before he's about to be sacrificed, and the bees are getting poured over his head, that nut thing and everything. It's like
we gotta talk about that
more.
more.
Of course you got to this. Like, of course he's definitely allergic to bees. Why wouldn't he be definitely allergic to bees? But he's done. Just like you said, what kind of cop? You're supposed to be some hotshot cop, and then you get there, and then it's like these people have this sack with what looks like it could be the size of a small child's corpse with blood dripping out. What is it, a shark or something? Like, his powers of deduction are really that badly impaired. You know what I mean? You have this awful, serious bee allergy, but you're all...
You went to a place that's entire economy is based on the production of honey.
Of course, why wouldn't you have an allergy to bees? You know, it's so silly. So I wrote that as a low. Yeah, that's really everything. I covered everything.
So just before I get into my lows that I think are the other lows of this, we got to talk about the last act of this movie, and I mean, this is where the movie really comes alive. If you watch this movie knowing it's a comedy, or thinking that it's a comedy, or going into it thinking like, okay, I'm going to watch this film to laugh, it's funny from the first frame. It's funny from the word go, right? If you watch this movie, he's just a... But if you watch this movie under the false pretense that it purported itself, which is that you're going to watch a thriller or a psychological thriller or a horror film or whatever it was kind of trying to be when it first came out, or based off of what the original Wicker Man was, you're just kind of spellbound. You're just like, what? This is very bad all the way through. And then you get to the last 30 minutes of this movie. And when you get to the last 30 minutes of this movie, it turns into such a bizarre... Everything that happens in this movie...
The twist is pretty good.
What twist?
The twist at the end of the movie when you realize that it was all a big scam to get in there.
But you didn't see that coming? You didn't see that...
So the audience is supposed to see that.
So here's what I think is a problem with the movie in general, okay? And again, I kind of know the answer to this, but I'm just going to posit it as what I think is a big problem. They want to sacrifice Nicolas Cage to be able to get their honey production back up. They think that if they make a human sacrifice, they will renew their harvest, and they will get the bees. There'll be more bees. There'll be more honey. That's how their entire economy is based off of the production of honey. So I understand the idea that they need to get him to the island. They need to get him there. And the way that they get him there is that Willow, who's this woman who he was a former lover of his, is saying, I need your help. You need to come and you need to help me find my lost daughter. My daughter has gone missing. Please help me. And the motivation for the character is set up in the opening scene where he fails to save the life of this young girl, which to me, that opening scene always kind of freaked me out, because when I remember watching that opening scene, it's so weird and so stilted and strange that I kept thinking, like, are the characters in this opening scene somehow related to the people on Summerisle? Because what that does is it sets up the motivation for the character that I wasn't able to save this little girl. So now there's another little girl that I can save. So this is why I will go to this island and do this. So you're understanding the character's motivation based off of the opening scene and his failure. It's a redemption story, exactly. But the point I'm making is that, so now you get him once he gets to the island. So we've created the reason for why he would want to go, and now Willow has lured him there, and now he's there. Why put him through the paces? Why make him this? If the idea is that they just want to sacrifice him, why create this elaborate ruse to make him chase around a young...
I just said it because they were afraid of him leaving. They had to create this because the idea is that he's such a brilliant cop. He would have figured it out. Like, they need to make this game, this web for him to get stuck in.
But the minute he steps off that plane, they can't break his knees right then and then stick him in a room. I mean, there's all these weird scenes where at any point this guy should have tried to have left. And not only at any point this guy should have tried to have left, this guy already left. He finds the guy on the boat plane. Yeah. And you know, and not only that, then he walks into the weird room where the guy's all stung up with bees, and then he walks into the room where the girl's got like the beard of bees, and he's just like, "Well, this is weird." And he just continues on with his day. Like this isn't the most...
How long after is the scene where I'm talking about where he comes down the staircase
Right. But what I'm trying to say is that once they get him on the island, once he's on the island, they've got him, and to put him through the paces.
Well, I guess you wouldn't have a movie.
You wouldn't have a movie. You wouldn't have a movie if they didn't put him through the paces.
I guess if this is a question like you'd be asking me, this is an answer that you would give me.
It's just there's no movie. Then there's no movie. Again, this is, if you hold it up to scrutiny, it's not meant to be held up to scrutiny because it's so stupid. It's so dopey. But that's why if you watch it as a comedy and you just watch it to watch Nicolas Cage go nuts. And then when we get to the end, when we get to the amazing... What is it? It's like that he's literally saying, "My legs! You broke my legs! Don't move me! My eyes!" It's so...
It begs the question, were they taking this seriously
They-
in production? They must have been. I don't know, like, it begs the question, anybody that cast Nicolas Cage in a movie, like...
I think,
expecting
but
it to
see,
be against
but
the
see,
French
I think he is taking it seriously, and I think
I know he is.
they have these horrible digital bees, and I bet that he, in his head, when he's performing the scene, is saying to himself, like, "What would the bees be doing to me? They would be stinging my eyes. I must scream about my eyes. You know, they'd be the bee's knees." It's just so good. The truth is, honestly, and again, and I'll get into my highs, the highs that I have in the movie. This is not an unpleasant movie to watch. When we watched Battlefield Earth, it really took a lot of effort to watch it. This is a movie that's...
It wasn't fun.
Yeah, it wasn't fun.
It really wasn't.
This isn't...
The lunch part was fun. But that...
It needed more lunch. Battlefield Earth needed more lunch.
This movie, with all of its ridiculous moments,
It's
part of what makes it so endearing.
the fact that you're laughing through it as much as you're laughing through it really makes it such a fun time.
It's just a Nicolas Cage. I mean, you're out there listening to Nicolas Cage.
He did. So I told you this. They did recently. They did a well. They've had for several years. They've had Cage Fest, where they do a Nicolas Cage film festival, and he showed up at the most recent one. And he read the Telltale Heart, and he stayed through the whole festival, and he actually programmed it. He actually was like, "Here are a couple of movies that I think I would want people to rewatch and say, maybe you didn't give this a good enough look." No. He knew about Wicker Man, and everyone's seen it. All right. So hold on. So I'm gonna go through the rest of my lows real quick. So lows, screenplay. I think the screenplay is, if this was trying to be a thriller, it's just really bad. And again, you can even see where they do these weird hallucination scenes or these dream sequences.
He's on a ferry.
The worst, the ferry when the he's seeing. And again, this is to remind the audience. This is like screenwriting 101. It's like, remind the audience why he's going to this island, and they have to show, oh, he didn't save this girl, so because he didn't save this little girl, he wants to save another little girl. It's so, and then they show like he's looking out the ferry window and he sees the truck run the fucking girl over. It's just it's bad, and it's badly implemented. When you watch it, it is kind of funny that, like, how is he's seeing a car run over a girl on a ferry? No, it's because it's the car that hits her when the dialogue is obviously horrific. I read somewhere that they used a lot of the original dialogue from the original movie, but again, if you're going to adapt it and you're going to put it into a more modern context, you have to be prepared to change the dialogue. Like when he walks in, he's like, "You're a liar, and you're the biggest liar I know." Like, maybe that's a line in the original movie, but you can't have it sit in this modern version of the movie without it sounding fucking stupid. It just doesn't sound right. It makes it sound silly. All the flashbacks, the one that I think is the most predominant, the one that really calls attention to itself, is when he goes to try and find the pilot has the water plane. And then he thinks he sees Rowan in the water, and he dives into the water. And it's this whole scene where he thinks he's going to get the dead body of Rowan, and it's this jump scare. And then it cuts from the jump scare to him sitting on the dock, and now he's holding the dead body. And again, this is why I don't think this was meant to be a comedy.
Well, okay.
Drag.
This made me think of something too.
Sure.
The female cop that he's like friendly with in the beginning of the movie, like they seem to set that up like it's, you know, she has a thing for him and whatever. Like there's something there that you think you're gonna catch on to at some point in the movie. It's like, and it never does. It's like, well, what's the point of that then?
Yeah.
You know
Yeah. Because that scene in particular.
Like, okay, this will come back into play later, and then it doesn't. It's just
Well,
the only thing she's meant to say is, you know, we don't know who they are. We never know. Okay, so then why does it seem like you two might be a thing at some point?
Yeah.
Or like, why would it even go there if it's not going to go there?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And that scene too. It's funny because when she first shows up.
Like Nicolas Cage Vanity, where he's like, no, the actress has to pretend to be in love with me, even if nothing happens to her, but she's after.
Maybe you might have nailed it on the head. They love the Cage. All bitches want to get in the cage.
Whatever it is, he does himself.
He really did. He really did. I'm telling you right now, whatever the next movie he makes is, the tagline should be "All bitches want to get in the cage." That's amazing. That's really good. All bitches want to get in the cage. I don't even know how to segue off that. That's so good. As far as highs go, I got very few highs. The only highs I really have for this movie are, you know, it's only an hour and 40 minutes. And for me, I think it's not well paced. It's not really a well paced movie, but it moves pretty quickly. And if you're gonna watch it knowing that it's a comedy, or knowing that it's unintentionally a comedy, it's not a bad movie to watch. Like I said, the way when we watched Battlefield Earth and it was tough to get through it, this is a lot easier to get through. And again, Nick Cage is one of those actors. Like I said, he's on two different levels. He's always dialed up to 1,000, but if the filmmaker knows how to ingratiate that into if they can harness it into their film and into the story, it's really good. Yeah, and if you watch, and what you're watching in this movie is it going off the rails. You're watching a Nick Cage performance just going off the fucking rails, and it is so much fun to watch. I would recommend anybody who's not seen this movie. I would, the way that you don't need to see Battlefield Earth. There's plenty of terrible films you don't need to see. This is a movie that
Instead of watching Battlefield Earth, watch this movie
twice. Just watch it twice. It's a lot of fun. All right, so. Okay, so let's do the coin toss. We're going to do the coin toss for next week's episode. Again, as always, please write into Movie HighLow, MovieHighLow @gmail.com. Give us your recommendations for high or low films. Just give us a little bit of background as to why it's a good or bad film. Okay, so we're going to do the coin toss. Shit, I keep fucking drawing. No, I'm do it. Heads. It's heads. So we're going high. It is The Irishman. This is going to be a fun episode because we both have very different opinions of this movie. Yeah. So thank you for powering through this. I know you haven't felt good tonight, but no, you saw. Yeah, all three of you. Well, thank you for tuning into this episode of Movie HighLow. We will see you next week with The Irishman, and have a great night.
What's in the bag? A shark or something?